All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the KC Sports Report. I'm your host, Michael Darcy, as always, and today I have the luxury of having Lucas Murphy, the beat of KC, in studio at 810 Sports Radio. Lucas, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing fantastic, Michael. I appreciate you having me in, and pretty cool environment. Love coming in here and doing shows and things like that. So I'm excited to be here for sure.
It's so great to get you in the studio. We're trying to get Josh in studio, but the Chiefs lost the AFC Championship game, so he's just like, I don't really want to come in, and I didn't want to come in either, so it kind of made sense.
I think he's the reason why we lost.
Yeah, I blame him.
Let's blame him.
Yeah, he went to the game. He even said that he has a bad track history of going to games because they often lose.
Yeah.
So, Josh, if you're watching this, don't go to any more Chiefs games.
None.
Please. But today I wanted to talk about Matt Nagy and Eric Bieniemy. Matt Nagy's coming back as the quarterback's coach, which, I was kind of reluctant to bring him back at first, but I think that under the guidelines of a quarterback's coach, I'm okay with that. I think that that's enough power to influence some decisions, but not like you're controlling the offense decisions. So what are your thoughts on Matt Nagy coming back to the Chiefs?
I think it's a really good thing. I mean, you're bringing back someone who is familiar with Andy Reid's style. You're bringing back another coach who's familiar with, at least understanding like the importance of Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, how things kind of function within the offense. And, granted, Alex Smith is completely different than Patrick Mahomes, two different playing styles. But I think the adaptability and understanding the game of football, it would make that an easy transition. So I like it. I would expect that, Nagy's going to have a good relationship with him anyways. It looked like when Alex was here, those guys were always communicating anyway. So I would really anticipate probably an easy kind of plug in and just moving forward. The question is that really all his role is going to be? Is there going to be some pressure with Bieniemy still being the offensive coordinator and Nagy having that head coaching prior experience and a lot of things like that? So it'll be interesting to see how that goes, but I couldn't imagine too much. I mean, this team has a focus of going to the Super Bowl, and that's their goal. So, and as coaches, you're trying to create success, and that's what I think they'll do.
Yeah, I think that the idea that Matt Nagy's going to come here and say, I'm entitled to this, Matt, you almost are not in the league. So he's grateful, I think, to be in Kansas City. And, he was the OC in 2017, the year before Patrick Mahomes, but he was still on the team.
Yeah.
And in that year, I think that Alex Smith had 4,000 yards passing.
Yeah, I mean, the offense was doing some incredible things under Alex that they hadn't seen before, at least for a while. So, yeah, I think and now you got one of the, in my opinion, the best quarterback in the league. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see.
And honestly, I think as a quarterback's coach, you couldn't really get many better options. Because I know Doug Peterson was an option out there. He got the head coaching job in Jacksonville. But as a quarterback's coach, I like the move. Now, if they're grooming him to be the next offensive coordinator, that could be an issue for me because I don't know if he is going to be the offensive mind that we want. Love him or hate him, Eric Bieniemy is a pretty good offensive coordinator. And I think that he brings a lot of new ideals to the table. And Matt Nagy's offense in Chicago was really not that good. And a lot of people are like, it was Chicago. They didn't give him the fair shake. I think he's the reason that they weren't really good a lot of the time because Mitchell Trubisky looked pretty good, but pretty good's a stretch. But he wasn't really as bad as everyone said he was. Yeah. But I think that when you look at kind of how he utilized those guys in the offense, it just wasn't very good. And he had a year with Justin Fields. Granted, it was his rookie year, but he wasn't able to accomplish anything. And I think the defense is really why they got to the playoffs as often as they did. And I don't know if you heard the story that came out, but apparently after they lost to the Saints a couple years ago in that playoff game that was on Nickelodeon, just Matt Nagy never talked to Allen Robinson for the next 5 months. Just did not talk to him. And I don't know if that's the kind of guy that, is what the Chiefs are trying to put in that locker room, but I think this is a good move. I will say that, and as of right now, as he's the quarterback's coach, I like it.
I think you got to take it, and a lot of people have to take it in consideration. He was the head coach. He was the person that was in charge of everything. I mean, that's what they do. And now his responsibility is so niched down. His job is to focus on the success of the quarterback, giving them, ways to be successful. So I think that's something we have to really kind of focus in on. And I also think, too, if they are grooming him to be the OC, again, I'm kind of okay with that because we understand that Andy Reid is the all-be-all in the end of it. Andy's the one that decides the decisions. I believe, whether or not it's true, Bieniemy calls the plays or Andy Reid calls the plays, that's kind of beside itself. But I think if Nagy does end up stepping into the OC position, I'm not too worried about that either because he doesn't have to worry necessarily about who's going to be going out on defense and maybe an injury happened here and he's got to figure out who he's going to plug in and communicate that with the D coordinator. His job is strictly to focus on that offense and the success of that offense. So I think that takes a lot of pressure off of him. And again, we're niching it even down more because he's only the quarterback's coach.
Yeah.
All that other pressure goes to Bieniemy now. So I really like the move, and I think if they do end up grooming him into that OC, I'm still not too worried because, again, Andy's the head seer over all this. So.
Oh, and Andy's designing all the plays.
Yeah.
And as I said with Blake in that previous episode talking about Eric Bieniemy, it's hard to call a bad play when Andy doesn't really draw up bad plays. You know what I mean? Like, he is an offensive mastermind, and he knows what he's doing. And I don't think that he would just blindly give guys trust that, honestly, they probably don't deserve. Yeah. But I think that as long as he's the one that's creating and scheming up all these plays, Nagy could be potentially the one that's calling them in the future, but he's not designing them. Yeah. And I think that's a good thing for Chiefs fans and a good thing for Chiefs Kingdom. But I will say, the Chiefs had this opening at the quarterback's coach with the departure of Mike Kafka. And that's another guy we should talk about because I thought Mike Kafka was going to be the next Chiefs OC. They blocked him from interviewing for head coaching candidates for the past 2 seasons in the hope that he would be the next OC. And he ended up taking that OC job with the Giants. And I think that's a really good opportunity for him. But I don't think the Chiefs expected him to leave. I think that kind of caught them off guard. But I also think that the idea that Eric Bieniemy was still going to be the OC for the Chiefs after 4 years of great offenses, I think that kind of surprised him as well. So we got Bieniemy back, but I think the departure of Kafka, who was probably going to be the next OC, and if you read that article, which may or may not be true, it kind of said that he had a lot more input on the offense than we knew. And I do believe that to an extent. I think that he did have some aspects and some input on this offense. But what are your thoughts on Kafka going to New York?
It makes sense because Dabble obviously is going there from Buffalo. He had, experience in Kansas City.
Yeah.
And so, for Kafka to take that leap and go to be an OC, and he's kind of been groomed to be that QB whisperer as well. I mean, he's under the Andy Reid tree, and so depending on how they handle Daniel Jones there in New York, I think that'll kind of determine how his success goes. Are they going to, accept his 5th-year option, or are they going to go after a Russell Wilson or a more veteran quarterback that could succeed in that offense? It'll be interesting to see, but I think it's nice to see him kind of get his feet wet, and if he does show success, maybe he does eventually come back to Kansas City as the OC down the road. And, maybe Nagy's using this as an opportunity to kind of just create some success for himself, and maybe he goes and interviews for a head coaching position later on down the road. So I think there's a lot of things to happen, and Kafka going to the Giants, it stinks, don't get me wrong, but I think it could be a good thing for him, and in return it could, pan out good for Kansas City.
It's going to give the Chiefs a chance to run it back with the same guys, and I think that Nagy's going to be able to offer something in terms of a veteran coaching voice that Kafka didn't really have, and that is a good thing. But I also think that the Chiefs' OC job, whether Bieniemy fills it or not next year, it is the premier job on the market.
Yeah.
And honestly, it might be a better gig than going to Jacksonville or going to a place that has a really bad organization. And I think that's also something to look out at. But, Eric Bieniemy is coming back on another 1-year deal. And if you would have asked me this 3 weeks ago, I would have said, yeah, no brainer. He's going to come back. I think that there's some hookup on him not getting a head coaching job. I don't think it has anything to do with race. And I think that's just, he's not a great interviewer. I think that the Chiefs playing deep into the postseason for the past 4 years has limited his interview capabilities. And that is probably why he doesn't have a head coaching job. But I would be very surprised if there's a lot of Chiefs fans out there that weren't excited with Eric Bieniemy coming back.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of mixed, and I think the reason why I would say that is because of that crazy, absurd article that came out, and I really think it created some division. I think some people, I mean, if you listen to Eric Bieniemy talk, man, the power that comes from when he talks, the motivation, the way he talks to players, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes. I mean, there is what's the show that they air every week for the Chiefs where it's through 65 toss power or whatever.
Oh, it's the franchise.
The franchise. There's an episode where they're up at training camp and Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes are talking, and Travis goes, "Hey, who would be your best friend," or whatever he says. And Patrick Mahomes says Eric Bieniemy, and he's like, "Oh, that's a great choice, and here's the reason why." Tyreek Hill is tweeting out, "This is one of the best OCs, the best offensive minds, the best coaches in the entire office." They don't just say that stuff for a reason, and I think Eric Bieniemy is a fantastic coach. But yeah, I think over a period of time, things can get stagnant. Maybe too many of the same plays are called. I mean, how many times have we seen that Travis Kelce almost little shovel pass thing?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
or either that or they try to get cute with an offensive lineman doing that.
Yeah, and so I think sometimes that stuff gets stagnant, and maybe a change is good. I don't think that speaks on any negativity about Bieniemy, but maybe it's just a time to change things up. And so I could see that perspective, but to be negative about a guy who has created a lot of success for Kansas City and the Chiefs especially, that one kind of threw me off when I did see it.
And if the article is a hit piece, which we think it is, and whether or not some things are true, I don't think that changes anything in the locker room. I still think the guys love him. That'll always kind of be the case. And if the Chiefs are trying to get back to that ultimate goal of winning a Super Bowl, you're going to need continuity within the coaching staff. Mm-hmm. And we saw guys like there was Ryan Poles who went to be the GM of the Bears. Yep. And you've lost, like Kafka, you're losing guys within your front office because the Chiefs are such a great organization. Yeah. You can't afford to keep losing these guys and just expect to replace them like it's nothing. Yeah. So I think that Bieniemy coming back for another year, I'm assuming it's going to be a 1-year contract.
It is.
This is a good thing, and this offense is going to thrive. Now, I think that obviously there's some tuning that they could do, but I would be saying that if they won the Super Bowl. There's always something you can do to improve because there's 32 teams in the NFL. You're one of them. Mm-hmm. Everybody else is trying to figure out a way to beat you. Yeah. And if you stay the same, you're not going to adapt well and you're going to die. So the Chiefs have got to adapt every single offseason, and we forget we were a half away from going to a third straight Super Bowl. Yeah. Now, it didn't finish like that, but it kind of took a whirlwind of things going wrong, and honestly, we don't have to talk about that because it's kind of depressing. But I think that Bieniemy coming back is a good thing. Nagy as the quarterback's coach is a good thing. Mm-hmm. I think the coaching staff right now is solid, and it's really going to depend on what the Chiefs do in free agency. But I think that right now they are making the right moves, it seems. The defensive line coach. You know his name off the top of your head?
Not off the top of my head, but, man, he's a powerful individual himself. I mean, the experience
Joe Cullen.
Yes, the experience he has coming from Baltimore when he ran that defensive line. He was the D coordinator for the Jaguars, working with Josh Allen, and I mean a lot of good players down there in Jacksonville. And so yeah, I think that's a huge signing for the Chiefs. And I think right now it's undervalued just because we're in the off season. I think that could play huge factors into Chris Jones's resurgence. Yeah. Depending on what happens with Frank Clark,
Mike Dana's development.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Kendo.
That's big time. So, and then if they draft anybody, so yeah, I think that's a big piece and he's a former DC, so maybe he aids in some of the things that Spags might need help with. I think that's a huge signing too, and that's an Andy Reid kind of making a good decision.
Well, then you were losing Sam Madison, the DB's coach. He went to go coach with the Dolphins, which. I mean, he was a Dolphin. That was kind of his dream job. And Andy Reid actually pushed him towards that job. Yeah. So good luck to him. But I think that, we got to find the next guy. And I think Matt House is going to coach at LSU, the linebackers coach.
That one, I think it stings a little bit.
Yeah.
I think he's a special coach. And for him to go be the D coordinator for LSU, good for him, but I think that one might sting a little bit.
It's going to depend on who they get to replace him. They might already have their replacement. I'm not too sure.
So they pulled Daly,
okay,
who used to be the
D-line,
and he's not a linebacker, and that's what they did. So,
and honestly, I like Daly a lot.
Yeah,
but he also didn't have the defensive line performing very well.
Yeah, and that's huge. And we've talked about it all season. Every time we jumped on something, and I can't tell how many articles I wrote about how applying pressure to opposing quarterbacks just is what Spag's defense is completely schemed around.
It's built around getting pressure.
It's just even the pressure. It's not even necessarily you have to convert them into sacks. And I think if you can't even do that, then and we saw that play out. I mean, we saw Josh Allen be able to run. We saw Joe Burrow do the same thing on huge third downs.
Yeah, and they got to him. They just couldn't wrap him
up. And
so
I think those are the things that you have to really focus on in the offseason. And I think that you can improve in that area too. I mean, those are places you can really look at to add in free agency and through the draft and make that so much better.
And Brett Veach said it in a press conference that the defensive line is going to be a main area of focus, and I think that they're going to pull a 2020, 2021 like offensive line reboot because they're going to need to rebuild this defensive line because I think that you let go. I guess Anthony Hitchens is a linebacker, but you let go of him. I think you have to let go of Frank Clark, but you got to do it post June 1st,
correct,
to get the most money out of that cut, and I don't think you eat as much dead cap if that happens as well.
Correct.
But you're going to have to address that in the draft and in free agency. And last year, I don't think the Chiefs had a ton of cap space to work with, but they signed Joe Thuney to be the highest paid left guard on the market. Expect the same thing to happen with them getting a pass rusher. I think they might make a trade or they might make a big free agent signing to acquire somebody that can move and can get to the quarterback.
Yeah. I saw I can't remember who tweeted it the other day, but they really gave a perfect kind of scenario for how the Chiefs can manage this offseason from a cap perspective. And if they restructured guys like Thuney, Patrick Mahomes, I think there was two others, they could ideally create almost 60 to 70 million in cap. And I understand when you're restructuring, you're pushing some things back, and that can create some problems down the road. But for the scenario you're in right now and some of the players you're looking to kind of recoup, we need to sign Orlando Brown. Tyreek Hill needs to be extended this year. I mean, he's a $20 million cap hit. If you extend him out, that number reduces significantly. So, plus we know what type of player Tyreek is. He has to be on this team.
Oh, yeah.
So the extension has to get done in the offseason. So I feel like, you don't want him to hit free agency, so go ahead and do it now. And so those are the types of moves I think you have to make. But then like you said, you have to be able to address the weakest part of this entire team, and that was applying pressure to the opposing quarterback. And how they do that, I'm hoping Veach does it smartly because if you look at it, we know what our linebacking core is going to look like. You have to kind of get those back end pieces. We know kind of what the cornerback room is going to look like, but they have a few pieces to add there. That defensive line is it needs a lot of work. And you have a lot of free agents coming off there too, and a lot of money tied up in Frank Clark. So, yeah, man, it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that. And it's easily number one priority.
I think they'll handle that. Now, we talked – you brought up they're going to extend Orlando Brown. I think they might franchise tag him with the intent of giving him a contract.
Yeah.
He's going to get paid. Like, they didn't trade a first-round asset to just let him walk in free agency the next year. They're going to pay him. Do you think we re-sign Tyron Mathieu? Because that's been a huge topic of conversation. Is he going to go play with the Ravens? He said that on Twitter. I don't take much stock into what Tyron Mathieu has to say on Twitter. But I think it's really a 50-50, and I think it's really going to be more on Tyron's end than the Chiefs' end. I think the Chiefs are going to offer him something, but they need to be realistic and not overpay for a guy that's getting up there into his 30s, has ACL problems, and he's only going to get older. And I don't want to say that he was bad last year because he definitely wasn't, but he wasn't the all-pro safety that he has been in years prior. So that is something to take a look at. And somebody said this, Brett Veach has a history of going away from guys that are fan favorites that we were paying big amounts of money. Eric Berry is a perfect example. So I would not be surprised if we don't see Tyron again. He's one of my favorite players. Oh, yeah.
And I'll be honest, he really is. But but I also want the Chiefs to be successful and not be hindered because I want my favorite player to return. And I think that in this upcoming draft, I think there's quite a few safeties that you could go out and get. And a lot of mocks have Daxton Hill from Michigan coming to Kansas City as in a mock draft. That would be a huge addition, minus anywhere from a $40 to a $60 million contract. And I think that you can kind of find those things too. And there's obviously going to be other free agents out there, like depending on how the Bengals, treat Jesse Bates, like
Marcus Williams, man,
another one. I mean, so there are guys out there that they may cost right around that same, but you're getting a much younger version, and so that's something we have to take into consideration. Man, I'm a huge Honey Badger fan. I think he provides a lot of things in that locker room that not a lot of people can provide. I mean, he has Justin Houston vibes and Eric Berry vibes. Like, he can get to a player and, hype him up. And I think that's an asset that is not everybody has. But, you're talking about an aging safety, and did he take a year off because he wanted to get paid and things like that. So, man, it's tough, but I think that they move on. I really do. I don't think that the numbers match up. Veach has done well with this salary cap, and his team has done well. And if he doesn't meet their number, I think they're willing to let him go. Where he goes, it is what it is. But I think he ends up going somewhere else.
I would like him to return. He's one of my favorite players as well, and I think what he's been able to do in just a short time in Kansas City is something that legends are made of.
Yeah.
Like the fact that he came in, won the Super Bowl in his first year, completely shifted that defense, and went to the Super Bowl the next year, ultimately fell short, but 2 AFC Championship game wins, a Super Bowl win, and I think he was an All-Pro twice. Mm-hmm. So what he's done in Kansas City has been incredible, but I think that also age is a factor, his contract's a factor, and I'm not going to lie, I love him and all, but what he does on social media is really a turnoff.
Yeah.
That's just not what we want to see, and that shouldn't be the main reason why you don't bring him back, but I think Veach is going to have to make that tough decision, and honestly, it kind of reminds me of the Justin Houston saga, because remember, we wanted to keep him, but he just did not want to take a pay cut, and I think the same thing is going to go with Tyron. We want Tyron. I think it's abundantly clear that we want Tyron and Tyron wants us. But I think Tyron's going to chase that bag, and as he should, go get that money, because you have an opportunity to go kind of solidify that and make another $30, $40 million. Mm-hmm. And if he can do that, great. I all good towards him. No ill will, but that's just not in the cards for the Chiefs.
Yeah. Well, and let me ask you this, because this is kind of some of the things that I helped, I guess, with my decision on this. You would agree that we need a wideout, a receiver 2?
I would. I think wide receiver 2 is a really big need, but I think the bigger need, like D-line, I think safety and corners, because we've undervalued those positions for so long. And I like Travarius Ward, I like L'Jarius Sneed, I like Rashad Fenton, but if you could go get J.C. Jackson from the New England Patriots with all this cap space you're clearing up, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Or just get that other guy in the draft, or just more depth, because I think we kind of been lucky the past couple of years that we haven't really had any substantial injuries within the secondary.
Yeah, and the reason I asked you that is because I think it would be interesting to see a lot of people's takes. Would you rather give Patrick Mahomes an absolute dominating weapon to go with Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, or get Tyron Mathieu on a deal, like you said, and on an aging contract, and just getting him plugged back in? Or, getting a wideout number 2 and maybe someone who's a little bit lesser of quality than the Honey Badger and plug him in at safety. I think a lot of people understand the importance of getting a wideout too versus getting the Honey Badger who's just a fan favorite.
Yeah, so I think wide receiver 2's a need. I would be really upset if we brought back DeMarcus Robinson. I think that ship has sailed, and it sailed a long time ago, but they wanted to keep it in the harbor. That ship's got to blow up at this point. They got to get rid of it.
Man, they keep bringing Garrett Dieter back, though, too.
Him at least and DeMarcus. He doesn't see the field, though. He's on the practice squad, but they got to let DeMarcus Robinson go. And I think if Byron Pringle is your number 4 or your number 3 or 4, my God, your receiving core is going to be good. And I think Juju's going to be the guy that's at the top of the list for the free agent wide receivers. I was big on the Allen Robinson train, but after what he said about Matt Nagy, I don't know if he's going to come here.
That's interesting, too. I'm glad you brought that up. I think it'll be interesting to see now if he's even, like you said, if he's even considered Kansas City because Nagy's got on the staff. And
that'd be brutal.
Man, his targets diminished, and I mean, we know he's a talented receiver, and yeah, for him to just disappear the way he did, something was definitely not right. So
something behind the scenes wasn't right.
Yeah,
it wasn't Justin Fields. It wasn't.
Yeah.
I don't know if Matt Nagy gave him the fair shake that he deserved. Because Mooney, that receiver, got a lot of opportunity, and he's a damn good receiver.
Yeah.
It's just, it was kind of like looking all at 2021. Where is Allen Robinson?
Yeah, but see, I also think too the Chiefs could find, depending on how they address this, they could find a very solid wideout number 2 in the draft. I mean, there are some very talented receivers. So to pair a solid receiver with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, like, that sounds disgusting to me. So maybe you do end up signing the Honey Badger and you draft just this all-world wideout. So there's going to be so many things, man. And I think that's what's great about us being able to talk about this stuff is because there's so many different options that can happen.
What are your thoughts on Jamison Williams?
Man, I was watching highlight tape on him the other day, and you know, he did tear his ACL, but dude's a freak. I mean, right up there with Devonta Smith. Like, man, his ability to just go and catch a football, his burst off the line is just incredible. His hands are incredible. I've obviously heard rumors that he might fall to close to us, and if they do, like, Chiefs should be enticed to trade up to get him or at least draft him. Yeah, man, I like that pick a lot.
I like Jamison Williams. I think I'd rather address wide receiver 2 in free agency and spend that first-round pick on defensive end. I think the end class is really good. Like, there's a lot of guys in there that we could get at a good value, and honestly, you can get good receivers in some of the later rounds as well. But I think defense is kind of what came up short this year. I know the offense didn't exactly play great in the AFC Championship game in the second half. In the first half, I mean, nothing was stopping them.
Yeah.
But I think that wide receiver 2 isn't the reason you didn't get to the Super Bowl.
No.
But I think, kind of like the defensive line, wide receiver 2 is a position they just have kind of neglected for so long, and they just kind of hope that somebody will rise to the occasion, and it never really happened.
Yeah. And I think, speaking of DN too in the draft, man, if you guys have not had a chance, go check out George Karlaftis from Purdue. Reminds me of Max Crosby, and he's mocked a lot to the Chiefs. Just an absolute mauler at the DN position, and it's just, they call him the Greek Freak. If you get a chance, man, I'm telling you, go watch a highlight tape of George Karlaftis from Purdue, and you'll be thoroughly impressed. I think he's 6'4", 270.
Goodness gracious.
And just runs like a monster. So, yeah, I think this draft is going to be very interesting because obviously there's teams that need quarterbacks, and this is a very non-quarterback friendly draft. And so I think some things can play into the favor of the Chiefs. It's just, what do they value more? What do they value more at that position? I mean, at 30. And that's what's going to be very interesting. And like you said, a lot of that can be determined how they handle free agency trades, things like that. Because we've heard the Josh Allen trade rumors. I think that's a little far-fetched just because of how valuable he is as a young talent. But could you imagine Josh Allen being traded to the Kansas City Chiefs?
With the way that the Jacksonville Jaguars are as a franchise, I don't think anyone's off the board. Yeah. And honestly, they might not have that 30th overall pick in the draft. They might trade that. And if they can get that premier pass rusher for that first and then sign him afterwards, I don't have a problem with that. Now, you can't pull a Frank Clark 2.0 and do the same thing again. That would be a mess. But I think that, you wrote an article for Casey. Actually, we're not going to even talk about that publication. But you wrote an article for a website that we are not going to name. And you were talking about should the Chiefs follow the Rams kind of MO of trading away their first-round draft picks to acquire talent. Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm not going to speak for you, but what were your thoughts on that?
Well, that's kind of my theory behind it is that we've seen it is kind of like a flash in the pan type of success. The Rams got a perfect scenario and won a Super Bowl out of it. And I'm not saying the Chiefs need to And I even talked about that in the article. They don't need to go trade everything they have to get these players, but it's not necessarily something that you shouldn't take into consideration. Pat McAfee talks about all the time how like 70% of first-round talent don't ever pan out.
Yeah.
And, trading a first-round piece for someone that is proven isn't a bad decision. So, in that piece, basically I talked about how the Rams were able to trade, first-round picks to get Jalen Ramsey, to go out and use second-round and third-round picks to get Von Miller, first-round picks to get Matthew Stafford. And, I mean, Ramsey's been there for a couple years. Stafford's going to be there for a couple years. Vaughn is obviously going to free agency, but they won a Super Bowl with that. And, again, I'm not saying the Chiefs need to be that extreme, but I think they should take into consideration, and they've done that. Look what they did with Orlando Brown. They unsuccessfully did it with Frank Clark. They've done it a few other times where they've traded some pieces. I think and it's panned out to help the Chiefs win a Super Bowl and go to 4 consecutive AFC championships. So that's basically what I was going at, and I think that the Chiefs need to keep continuing doing their style, and it's working. And I think there's a lot of factors that play into other things, but that if they keep doing their strategy and sticking to that plan, I think we're going to continue to see the success.
I think trading away your first-round draft pick to get a guy that is more established and has proven something in the league is a good thing, but also you need to hit on those second and third and fourth rounders.
Yes.
And Brett Veach has really done that with the pick of Nick Bolton and Creed Humphrey and a couple years ago, L'Jarius Sneed. He's almost found better talent with the later round guys than in the first round. Now, he hasn't had a ton of first-round draft picks, but I would not be against trading away your 30th overall draft pick, going to get somebody on the defensive line that's a lot more established. They're going to need to get more pass rush. I don't know how they're going to do it. I would assume free agency is going to be a big point of emphasis, and the draft. I think you got to go heavy in free agency and just supplement that with the draft, because I don't like the idea of putting all the chips to the table of we're going to get that guy in the draft, because draft boards don't go as planned. Yeah. Someone's going to pop up and take your guy, and how are you going to adjust to that? I mean, I don't know.
And I agree, and I'm more lean. I always lean towards the side of I would much rather get proven talent, but I see so much value, and you can historically go back and look at how much talent is drafted in the second and third rounds of any NFL draft. It's loaded with talent every year, and like big time names come from the second and third round. So to trade up, trade your first round pick, and maybe how we did the Orlando Brown trade. We ended up getting, I think, a second or a third with him.
We drafted Nick Bolton. Well, yeah, it was Nick Bolton with that pick.
And that's the type of moves you have to make, and that's where I think you have to give Brett Veach, credit. I was very harsh and very kind of critical of Brett Veach early on because I think his first couple of drafts were very kind of, but he's really flipped that switch and turned it on in these last couple of drafts. And like you said, those later round picks, L'Jarius Sneed's Trey Smith, holy smokes. I mean, yeah, he's done well with that, and whatever scout for him is kind of eyeing those guys in those rounds, that he's doing a really good job. So,
and with Ryan Poles going to the Bears, 2 more third-round draft picks.
Yeah.
Which, that's big. That's really big.
Huge.
Now, we're going to have to see what he does with them, because he's also drafted Colin Saunders and some less notable guys in those roles.
Yes.
But even if it's taking those 2/3 and sending them somewhere to get another player, those are 2 picks that you were just kind of gifted, and you have the chance to do whatever you want with those.
Yeah.
And I like that.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think that's something you have to take into consideration, too, is you can trade these picks and get some known talent and be good known talent and plug those in and still have the capabilities of drafting guys maybe that you're interested in. So, yeah, I think it's unique that we're able to get, comp picks for these guys, and it'll be interesting to see how they do this. And, we're going to be talking about it nonstop.
I'm excited for it.
Yeah.
I really am. So, Lucas, we covered everything from the coaching to the free agent possibilities of the defensive line and Tyron and maybe extending Orlando Brown Jr. We talked about it all, and I really appreciate you coming in studio and doing all this, and hopefully more stuff's going to be coming on kcsportsreport.com. There's going to be a lot more stuff that goes into the works of that. But, Lucas, I really do appreciate it. Where can the people find you?
Just find me at Twitter. It's the Beat of KC, and that's where I kind of engage the most. The YouTube channel is the Beat of KC, and those are really the two significant pieces for me. So
more to come in Lucas's future. He's on the cusp of doing some really big things, and I'm really happy for him.
Thank you.
And for me, you guys can follow me on Twitter. That is at KC Sports Report. Instagram is KC_Sports Report. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. More content is coming soon. With that being said, guys, have a great rest of your day. Thanks for watching.